Now, friends, from ambiencepolyhaven.com, from polyhaven.com, I downloaded this texture from the texture wood floor section. Look, it's a texture like this. I wanted a slightly light texture, friends, so I downloaded it. It's listed here as laminate floor. Look, let me give it to you as well. Look, they even provided it in a Blender file here. We don't need the Blender file. The texture file is sufficient. Let's immediately move it to our file section. I will already provide these to you. You will be able to use them from there. Let's go and change it right away, friends. Or let's create a texture from scratch. Now let's also create a texture from within Enscape, friends. Look, you've come here. From here, you can create a texture from the generic section. You come here, this part, friends. By right-clicking here and selecting export, you can re-export the textures you like. You can import them back by selecting import. You can export them by selecting export, friends. Look, there are various texture patterns here. Now, you come to the material section. You've come to the material section of SketchUp. You reset this. Look, this has also been reset. The texture appeared when you pressed the Alt button. It came here as material 1. I click on the generic texture from the texture section. From the texture section, look, just having this is enough for me, friends. In Enscape, it's enough for me to just see this. So it's enough for me to see this type of texture. Look, having this is sufficient. It's already 4K. I said open. My texture came here. By saying use albino, I created the bump map. It was set to 3. I immediately leave it between 1.5 to 2, friends. I also created the reflection map from here. Then I came back. Look, I will quickly come right here. I selected my texture and marked it friends. Look, the texture changed immediately. You can change it in this direction or the other direction. If you want it in the other direction, right-click on texture position. Right-click, rotate, say 90. It rotated and went to the other side. Let's take a look at the work immediately, friends. Look, the ambience of the work changes all of a sudden. As you can see, there was a texture change like this. The texture is really high quality, and it turned out to be the texture quality I wanted. I also want to change this carpet, friends. Actually, it's texture. Because why? Let's do something like this. I want to change the glare and reflection here a bit. Friends, that's why I'm going to move over here. I've come here. Where is the texture part? Here. I'm selecting this. Let me increase the bump a little. And when I pull this slightly to the right, look, it turned black, and I increased the reflection here, friends. Now, let's increase the bump map a bit. Let me come here. I set the bump map to about 2. Let the values show themselves a bit, friends. I came here. This carpet, I want to change this carpet. I will make a classic carpet there, friends. That's why I turned to the eye icon here. Look, like this. These are methods for improvement and correction. That is quality enhancement, friends. Let me get into this. Look, I selected this and deleted it. I went outside. I pressed ESC, took the carrier command. Look exactly from here. I came from here, friends. Like this. Let it end here. Here. Let me give it a bit of channeling. Let it detach from the ground a bit, because it can be like 0.5, 0.5. Look. Let it come like this. Let it not stick to the others. I marked it as a map group. Then I came back. Friends. I reset it from the select command. I pressed the plus sign. The material came to the bottom. The color is white. I select all of them like this. Let's assign this first if you want, then we can change it. Look, I came from here. Sorry. I came from here. I right-clicked on the list and said replace Enscape material. I went to the public section. I have my carpets here. Look, I want to select one of the classic carpets here. Look, it appears here. As you can see, like this. Quite nice. I mean, efficient. Look, as you can see, if you want this color to be a little darker, something like this can also be chosen. It can also be something like this. We have chosen a classic type of carpet here to put here. We have justified this area. It's good to have a process like this, friends. I say replace. Look, the carpet texture has appeared, as you can see, like this. Normally the place where the carpet texture starts and ends, look at these S's. The place where these S's are, friends. But you can do something like this. For example, you entered inside. You entered inside the texture. Let's do it like this from here normally. When I select this, we call it position on the texture. Look, I can make adjustments from here, friends, like this. Actually, look, when you bring this part here, let's do it like this so that this part also comes here. You can actually expand it a bit. Look, you brought this line, right? Instead of doing it like this, I'll do it like this. One moment, friends. Let me come over here. Look, I'm stretching this. I will bring this part over here. Look, normally it should extend like this. Let it stay here. Let me reset this from here. Let me move this a bit more outward, friends. So, let the end and the point of the carpet stay here. When I say done like this, look, this kind of image, this kind of situation has been created here. There we actually created a classic carpet, rug, atmosphere, friends. The colors of these can be changed. They can be a lighter color. We can make these different colors. It can be off-white or different colors. For now, let's turn it into a light color if you want. There was a coating here. Look, I removed the coating. It turned into this kind of color, as you can see. It became a color like this. We can slightly tone this down. I went to the color well section. Let me slightly tone this down, friends, like this. This could be a process. Look, it opened up even more differently. The atmosphere of the work gradually brightened. It became even more beautiful. I mean, this is, of course, up to the individual. They can do this in different ways. Here, we slightly opened it up. So, when we lightened the color, the shape and inherent quality of the work also changed. As you can see, this is the situation. Look, sometimes it can do things like this here. While saving, I double-clicked on a part of it. It took itself and went outside. The HDR we used here, as you can see, is the HDR from outside. I want to say something about HDRs. Normally HDRs, look, until this is saved. Shall we proceed like this, friends? When you enter polyhovo.com, look, we will also show this part on polyhovo.com. The texture section, the free texture section. The model section, the free model section. The HDR section, the free HDR section. All of them are free, friends. You say Pro, HDR. Look here, come the outdoor HDRs. There are various HDRs. There is an important detail in the HDR section. I want to talk about that, friends. When you select an HDR like this, move to the section with the spheres. Look, the part with the spheres. For example, this is a normal HDR and this is the HDR with the spheres. The effect on each sphere is the effect of our HDR. So, you get such an effect on metal, such an effect in open areas, such an effect on white, and such an effect on glass. You also get such an effect on normal matte and glossy surfaces. So, it means that when you use this HDR, you should look at the effect here. It says you will get this effect here. Look, here is the way it is used. As you can see, it is viewed from darkness to light, as you can see. This is the process, friends. So, when you use HDRs, for example, what did we use? Look, this is the HDR I used. A very nice HDR. When I use this, the result I got inside was like this. Let's bring it in. Look, I changed the camera from SketchUp here. Now it's here, friends. Let's do it like this. If you want to disconnect this link, look, normally, when I move on this part, the part here doesn't move. Look, I'm moving this part. This part doesn't move. Why? Because, look, the camera connection here is off. I pressed here, turned on the camera connection. Look, friends, when I move here, it moves there as well. There is a downside to this. The image in SketchUp and the render image here can differ. Therefore, it's beneficial to close this while rendering to make adjustments. Friends, that's a subtle detail as well. Look, as you can see, we've created a nice ambiance. We've captured the ambiance, friends. It's nice. How the sunshade creates shading like this. We can change this part here. We can change this part here. Let's go to polyhovo.com again if you like. I'm going back to the beginning. I'm going to the texture section from below here. Let's see what's in the tile section. Is there something called the tile section? Let's take a look at that if you like. I'm checking from here. I'll type tile in the search section. Yes, there's nothing called tile. It says metal roofing. Let's see, there are different fabrics. For example, we could use this on a quilt. It's a carpet, but it's given as a carpet. Let's see, friends. Is there anything else? The brick section. What I actually want to use is a bit more traditional. I want to use more traditional types of cladding beyond this. Look, what I mean is available on ambientcg.com. Look, it's something like this. We can use this. It's a bit different. I want to move to a more traditional situation there. So, for example, look, this could be it, this could be it, this could be it. Look, this could also be it. A different type of cladding. It leans a bit towards blue. We can create a different ambience there, friends. So let's see. What else is there? I mean, you can use one of these. I will change this after the lesson. I will do a few trials, friends. It doesn't need to be very dark. It could be something patterned like this. Look, it could be something like this. Look here. We have 4K JPEG, 4K PNG. PNGs take up a lot of space, but their quality is good. But if you're using a laptop, there's no need for this. Look, one topic leads to another. There is a detail in every detail. But here, if you're using average quality and a laptop, I would say don't go beyond 2K. But if you want to get high quality 4K, we'll do the job for you. Look, I pressed 4K and it suddenly downloaded. Friends, let's do that within the lesson and finish this section. Look, 4K has arrived. Look, they have provided everything. Friends, I took this and said, extract it. I immediately went and left it in our design section. I'm going to work. I came here right away. I clicked here with my downloaded file. Or let's do it from scratch again. It will be cleaner. Plus. Tile, I said 2. Okay. I came here. From the edit section, with my eyedropper tool, look here, friends, it says tile. It's enough for me to take this color part. I said open. Let it take this. I'll click here. Let's see. It might not look like in this picture. Let's throw it in and see how it will look. Look, a completely classic situation has formed here. Again, you can adjust this endpoint here. Look, let's do it like this. I say texture position. I move this line here by sliding it like this. I left it here. And the endpoint of the texture also looked nice, friends. And at the same time, I went to the texture section. Look, this is the active part. These are Enscape's warnings. Don't pay too much attention to these warnings, friends. It opened and closed automatically by itself. It might say something happened, but you don't need to pay much attention. We will create the bump map from the height map event here, then the reflection map. Just saying use albedo is enough. Very simple, friends. I mean, we've been talking about the same thing since the beginning of the lesson. Just saying use albedo, and adjusting the settings is enough. Look, this gives 3. 3 gives a bit. Too much so that the value is visible. In the reflection part, we also say use albedo again. We click on this. We pulled this down a bit so it shines a little, friends. This is entirely our situation. Let's go to the render section in the other part. Sometimes it comes late or it's recording. Look, it's recording right now. Of course, how nice it is somewhat debatable. Did this blue go here? Well, it didn't look very nice. It gave a bit of a bathroom vibe. Here. I mean, I will find different types of textures by experimenting, friends, because this didn't fit here. Maybe it could be a bit darker. For example, the color here might be compatible with this color, but here it could be the opposite of these, or a different shade. Friends, that's why I will change it.